In the Hearts and Minds, Book 0, The Birth of a Hero, Story 15. Who are the people? Please, what happened next? Grain Berman was not a good person. He was not the type to point and laugh at someone's abject misery, nor did he delight in causing intense pain in others. But still, he was not a good person. He'd had a cousin once, long, long ago, who had enjoyed the suffering of desperate souls with only a few moments more to live. Though Grain's father and grandfather and all of his uncles and aunts had distanced themselves from this cousin, Grain knew the truth. He had seen the same shimmer in their smiles, the same self-satisfaction reflected in all of their relatives. What set Grain's cousin apart was his inability to hide his appetites. And thus, the overzealous psychopath had been sent back to the homeland. No, not the Fromage Kingdom, for which Truvia United planted its feet. Grain's real homeland, the Republic of Stufant. While Grain was burdened with learning tax codes and studying the wordings of historical treaties, his cousin had gone home to the land of wheat, the land of grain. The Republic was made up of 8 independent clans and hundreds more that lingered along the edges, but each one was represented in the heart, and that was where Grain's mother and several of his aunts had lived. He didn't learn until nearly 20 years had passed, but this cousin of his eventually evolved one step further, killing several of their family members in an explosive rage. He had been the first, see, the first frosted. And he just so happened to have killed Grain's mother. The two facts existed side by side, and yet it is his picture that resides at the memorial for the fallen frosted soldiers. His cousin was the first soul Grain had been expected to forgive. And he had. It had been so easy then. Thank you for your time. Lim escorted the young miss out of the cafe. Grain didn't need to turn around to see that the reporter's body acted as a barrier between this booth and the rest of the world. Before another one could come in, Lim returned, scooting into the booth, one leg slinging quickly over Grain's thigh. In the brief tussle of limbs, they each kicked the shins of the bodyguard seated across, but the man barely looked up from his strawberry pancakes. Unlimited pancakes was this cafe's deal, and you didn't have to pay if you ate your weight in them. Grain would be paying either way, but his bodyguards had a sportsmanship about them that he wasn't sure what to do with. So, pancakes. Did you hear what she said? Lim's voice wasn't a whisper, but it wasn't loud either. Grain didn't think he could be loud. Even when they argued, his most effective weapon was the sigh. Your annual checkups are little more than loyalty tests. What kind of doctor sits there and asks you where you keep your flag and if you donate to the war fund each week? I get that, Grain said, and he did. When he'd first been given the speech cards, all those years ago, he'd ruminated on where to enunciate and where to pause. But as his eyes had glossed over the words, he'd known there was more to it. Part of his job, historically, had been to not ask the question, what else is there? It had been so easy back then. Lim nabbed a grape from Grain's plate, offering it to him first. But when the president shook his head, he shrugged, snapping clean through its fleshy middle. Grapes were so loud in those first couple of bites, but then they lost the fight, turning into a mush of silence. The louder the protest, the more eerie that silence. Grain found his hand wandering up Lim's spine, though he knew he wasn't going to receive anything in this cafe, sitting 2 feet away from a bodyguard. And, surprisingly, Lim reached out, swiping a thumb across Grain's temple. He shuddered to think there were crow's feet staining his reporter's delicate thumb, but held in his more and more familiar feeling of despair. Or he tried to. Based on the frown that puffed out Lim's lips and pulled his thick brows together, he hadn't been as successful as he'd hoped. It had been so easy before, just like his job, just like his inheritance. "I get it," Grain said again, then added, "But did she have to touch you like that?" Lim blinked. "Like what? The handshake?" "Handshake," Grain muttered, turning his eyes to the accordion-domed ceiling. "A handshake, right. That's why she was stroking your arm." "She was emotional," Lim protested. "Her whole family had to change their names to something sweeter, and then her 2 oldest daughters were in prison for days on suspicion of abetting rebels. All because of the stupid doctor's office getting upset when they tried to ask for real medical help and were instead asked to recite our Pledge of Freedom." Grain sighed, but it wasn't nearly as effective as his reporter's. "But her hand, you didn't even see it." "I didn't have to." Grain tweaked Lim's nose. "You're wearing that raincoat that makes the swishy sound. I heard it all the way from over here." At last, Lim brought out his first, the sigh. It was doubly effective in making Grain's heart want to pump out of his chest. That could have been anything. Brushing up against the table, shifting, seriously anything. But Grain shook his head. "Remember when we went on vacation to Tintana and we got caught in the rain? All I did was kiss you a little, and your coat was louder than the slot machines inside the building." "A little?" Lim slapped a hand over Grain's mouth, staring pointedly at the bodyguard who had finished his 4th plate of pancakes and stared out the window with the contemplative knowledge that he would have to get a 5th if he wanted to keep his job. Lowering his voice, Lim dramatically tweaked Grain's nose, using his own tricks against him. "That wasn't a vacation. We went there to stop the trafficking of your sugar that turns unsuspecting victims into frosted, something your company pretended they weren't doing." Grain shrugged. Either way. Lim activated another "the sigh," disentangling himself to return to the booth at Grain's back. Soon, the tinkle of a newcomer arriving had his reporter vacating his seat, eager to greet another person whose life Grain had ruined. He wasn't a good person. Wasn't anything close to it, even if he didn't delight in torture and pain. It wasn't until he'd met this man, in this very cafe, at these very same booths, with the turquoise plush seats and their fading color, and the black and white tiles on the floor and the partitions, that his viewpoint had changed. Here, with the decorated glass that brought to mind psychedelic illusions of the horizon on the seas, life was different. Life was a current, but a wild one, an exciting one. But there were no oceans in Truvia, nor in the Fromage Kingdom. The grand, lazy river that lay between them had been ruined with blood and artillery. It used to be green, and now it was a dark mud red. Grain knew all that waste. The bodies either side couldn't reclaim, even the heavier objects, would float down the lazy banks, flowing faster and faster until it reached a great rapid. This was a convergence of 7 waterfalls, each one coming from a different country. And at the center, at the heart, the Republic of Stufant cleaned it out, diligently, solemnly. Grain knew his Truvian citizens were probably disparaged beyond belief by those stately scholars. Truvia was probably dubbed the land of barbarians and ingrates. For each sin the Republic of Stufant fished out of the water, Grain's path home was paved another layer over. He could never return home. It wasn't that big of a deal. He'd known his purpose. How could he ever forget? It was impossible. Even during his more turbulent years, hormones running wild and making him want to change who he was to better suit the company's needs, only to realize he didn't have full control over what was inside. There were pieces that could not change, no matter how he suppressed it. It had been so easy before. Grain didn't understand why his entire life's dedication could falter one step and then fail to ever right itself again. It made him think that the foundation he'd built was never strong enough, that he hadn't tried hard enough, he hadn't ever been enough. What, then, did that mean for how he had lived? For the souls he had condemned? If all of his efforts were so meaningless, all this time? 7 more whose lives Grain had ruined showed up to the cafe that day. His bodyguard had added to his 4 plates, munching through the banana and the soufflé pancakes, but eventually stalled at the blueberry crumble. Unfortunately, he hadn't eaten his weight, so Grain coughed up the money. He was going to anyway, but he made sure to play it up a bit. As the man gagged silently into his fist, Grain could see the competitive edge in his piercing stare. Maybe the next of his bodyguards would do better. They couldn't walk hand in hand, but Grain found a workaround. He put his hand in Lim's pocket, yanking Lim's into his. His reporter did little more than roll his eyes and look away, but he didn't move. Once arriving back at the presidential suite, Grain let the door fling open, losing his bodyguard within the mass of 9 others who had waited all day for the results of their brethren's pancake escapade. Waiting right in the middle of the hallway, empty white plate laid flat against his yellow stomach, the badger stood, waiting for them. Grain was pleased to see that instead of purring or relaxing at the sight of them stepping into the parlor, there was only the impatient tapping of his feet against the floor. "Badger, your plate's empty. That can't be." Uncaring of the eyes, who would rat him out to the entire board of Truvia United's shareholders, Grain nabbed Lim's hand, and away they went. Badgers were quite fond of meat pies, but Grain wondered if he would perhaps be the first one to eat his weight in pancakes, too.